Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Izuku sat in the yard behind the mansion as he let his ki flow all around him. As he was doing this, Keitase and Murayama were watching him closely since they had been curious about his training. Watching him master his ki flow was amazing to see, as he had been meditating for a while to the point that the girls had thought that he was taking a nap. "You think that he's taking a nap?" Keitase asked, as Murayama looked on in awe. "He's so adorable when he is meditating," her friend said, as they both smiled at the scene. As if to make him even more adorable, the animal life had moved around him, as if to make a scene from a Disney movie, as the animals had decided that they were going to hang out with him. The most notable part about the scene was that a few birds had tried to make a nest out of his hair, whilst he sat there with his eyes twitching at their movement. "Wow, even the animals are being near his calm aura," Osami said, scaring both girls as they let out an adorable leap. Unfortunately, it caused all the wildlife to run away as the duo looked at their captain. "You scare them off," they both yelled, tackling the woman to the ground. With Izuku, he was still meditating as he conversed with Drake, and he couldn't lie about the fact that his ki flow was nearly mastered. All that was left was to master both Senjutsu, as well as Tuki, and he would be a jack of all trades of a fighter. "Your progress in training your energy has been leagues better than my previous hosts. You're grooming yourself to become the next greatest Red Dragon Emperor in the short line of them." Drake congratulated Izuku. "I know, Drake. It's been fun learning how to use ki to my advantage in a fight. Now I wish to head over to the Norse in order to learn their kind of magic in order to expand my repertoire of magical abilities. I know you wanted to learn how to use the boosted gear, but I want people to remember that I was only the greatest Red Dragon Emperor mainly because of the fact that I never really relied on the gear itself and only used it when necessary. But I still want to see if I can free you from your prison," Izuku mentally said, as Drake heard him. "If you wish to gain the magical prowess of the Norse, I don't see why you can't get that as well. If you're trained by the Norse as well, you won't have to deal with most opponents trying to kill you since their training makes it to where your field of view is around 360 degrees. Drake mused, as Issei nodded his head. "I really don't wish to leave Lady Yasaka and Little Kunu, but I need to get as strong as I can in order to protect myself from any and all factions that wish to use those I love against me. How strong would I be when I am at full power with Tuki?" Izuku asked Drake. "Don't worry, partner. You can send them letters about your travels if you wish. But overall, your power is on par with that of a lower-end ultimate class devil. And based on if your experience in battle is to show for anything as strong as a fallen cadre in the weaker portion of them. In terms of the regular angels, you'd be comparable to the Ace of Michael," Drake informed as Izuku smiled in happiness. "How strong am I compared to Lady Yasaka?" Izuku asked in concern. "She is still more powerful than you are. In terms of power as well as experience, she has you beaten since she is at the same level as Seraphal Leviathan. So you need at least a few months in order to be strong enough to defeat Yasaka on your own with your balance breaker once you unlock it, which shouldn't be an issue until you manage to use the power of it, until you power through the form. Stay away from the Juggernaut drive. It is dangerous, and you should try and make a form that is different from it. Make a new chant or something, I don't care. So long as it's badass, I could care less about it," Drake said, as he went back to sleep, cutting off the connection. As Izuku opened his eyes, they shined a dark emerald to show that his mastery over his main ki reserves was complete, and he was ready to master Tuki before Senjutsu. At this point, Yasaka moved closer to him as she smiled at his progress. He had his ki flowing about him softly and not like the nervous storm he had when he first arrived. "You mastered your own ki. Good job," Yasaka said as Izuku nodded his head. "I'm ready to learn how to use Tuki as well as Senjutsu," Izuku said as Yasaka gained a mischievous smirk on her face. "You are still sure that you don't wish to learn healing sage arts?" she asked, as Izuku's face became a crimson color as his nose bled a little. "No, I'm fine. No need to do that," Izuku said, as Yasaka laughed at his reaction. "I swear, you're just too easy to fluster." Yasaka said, as Izuku looked away. To think you managed to get me in bed with you, she said, as Izuku's blush worsened. Izuku and Yasaka sat in the open area as she went over the forms of Tuki that Izuku needed to learn and master. She showed him the perfect movements in order to utilize the power of it without losing the key control he learned before. And she told him to mimic her movements and make his own version of them. That way, it's unique to him and him alone. The day was filled with failures as well as breakthroughs as Izuku had struggled to master Tuki, and it wouldn't be the last day that he tried to master it. Days turned into weeks until the last week of June before Izuku was standing in the middle of the courtyard as he had an orange aura surrounding his entire form as he attacked Shadow, Izuku's, who attacked wildly. As he executed his movements almost unconsciously, he defeated his opponents as they disappeared into the background. It was here that Drake decided to connect their connection in the sacred gear in his mind. It's been a few weeks since you started learning Tuki. Have you kept your mind caught up with your studies? Drake asked, curious. Yes, in terms of schoolwork, I have made it past graduation for college students. I can't believe that my mind was as far ahead of my peers as I thought it was, and what others said it was. Izuku mused as he continued his motions. I'm proud of the power you're wielding right now. You can take on any high-class devil and humiliate them without any effort. Drake said, laughing. It's all thanks to Lady Yasaka. She was the one who took the time out of her day in order to train me in the basics before I learned on my own and increase my knowledge of it without her help. Izuku said, there is no need to be modest, Izuku. You're growing to become one of the most versatile Red Dragon Emperors in history. I've never had a host use Senjutsu, Tuki, as well as normal ki in their attacks. Not only that, but you're also thinking of adding Norse magic as well. It would take most of my other hosts years, or maybe more months than you had, in order to attain such knowledge. Drake praised. Thanks, but I really think you should be thanking Yasaka. Izuku said, looking away whilst training. Off in the orchard of the mansion, Yasaka watched as Izuku used his moves as well as Tuki in order to fight. He's growing at a faster rate than most yokai. He would be a great bodyguard when he becomes a man. Yasaka thought to herself, looking down at her daughter. It wasn't long after that day that Izuku fully mastered Tuki as he accidentally used too much when he was holding back his power as he went and made a new canyon behind the mansion where Yasaka lived. It was so sudden that the rest of the people inside the building saw that Izuku looked shocked at what he managed to do and were surprised at how much damage just a single misplaced punch could do to the environment. You've mastered Tuki that fast. Murayama yelled in confusion. Sorry? Izuku mumbled as he looked at them. You're just adorable. Like a puppy waiting for punishment. I think you need to be punished. Osami said, as Izuku looked at her confused. What do you mean by me being punished? Izuku asked, confused. You know what that is and can't understand a lewd joke. She muttered as everyone around her had only one thought. He's too pure. Izuku was inside his room packing his things. He really wanted to make sure that all of his belongings were inside his backpack. He was getting prepared to head to the Norse faction in order to learn how to master their kind of magic. He was getting really excited about learning about their kind of magic, as well as learning their language, since they originated from the Vikings of the past. But before he left, Osami had arrived at the door to his bedroom within the mansion as she leaned on the doorframe. Hey, Izuku, you ready for your punishment? She asked as he turned around. What is the punishment about? Izuku asked, concerned as his face looked slightly fearful. Don't worry, you'd like this punishment, Osami said, locking the door and closing the blinds. Lemon warning. Osami moved faster than Izuku could respond in the moment as she pushed him onto his bed. She climbed on top of him as he stared at her in confusion before she connected her lips to his own. As his eyes opened widely, he slowly closed them as he moved his hands over to her rear as their kiss became passionate. As she held his face, she felt his hands move about her body before resting on her rear as she inwardly smirked. If I didn't know any better, I'd call you but man, Osami said, as Izuku looked away, face reddening. I'm just kidding, but I won't call you a name for it, she said, as she took off her shirt, revealing a black lace undergarment that did nothing to hold back her melons, which, by the way, were 110 centimeters big. The undergarment was barely holding them in place as Izuku tore it off as his draconic instincts began to take over. Osami watched as Izuku's eyes became slits as he pushed her to her back on the bed and felt him knead her melons as he gulped on one of her nips. As Osami began to feel herself slowly be lost to her succubus powers, she began to take some of his vitality to consume off of. Izuku's haze in his eyes were being slowly taken from him as she watched as he slowly gained control over his lust. But nonetheless, he continued his menstrues and gulped even harder on her melons as he used one of his hands to rub her CT as well as grope her other melon. Osami was slowly losing control as she immediately flipped the script as she had Izuku on his back as he still was feeding on her melon and playing with her cat. But she decided to put an end to that before pulling down his pants to reveal a semi-hard PP that was around 8 inches in length at the moment. As she placed her mouth over it, she could smell the musk he had as if he didn't take a shower after his training session yet. Smiling in happiness, she took in the spunk as she continued to gulp him off as he groaned a little bit in pleasure. It got to the point that Izuku pulled her lower garments off and decided to just say F it and just glup her out. Now, it was a battle of wills who would release first, and Izuku came as soon as he felt her on his PP as he felt some very intense vibrations over it as he released in her mouth. With him all settled and Osami beginning to turn around, Izuku decided to flip them around once more as he pushed her body to the bed, having her rear in the air as he lined himself up to her PP that was dripping wet. He looked over at Osami as she stared at him with fear as well as trepidation. "Do you still want this to happen?" Izuku asked, as he still had control over his lust for the moment. "Yes, just please be gentle," Osami said, as Izuku nodded his head. With that, he pushed inside her with his fully hard foot-long PP, and as soon as 3 inches reached inside her, he found a blockage. Looking towards her again, she nods as he pushed harder as he broke her hymen as she grunted in slight pain as Izuku reached all the way inside her. His PP's head was hitting the stomach's entrance as a good 3 inches of him was still outside her. "It's inside," Osami said, smiling goofily. Her eyes were going to the back of her head as Izuku took that as his chance to do her now, and he started to move slowly. He could hear how she made a voice in pure bliss as she started to move along with him. As he continued on, his speed increased as he was still going soft for her in order to not harm her during this moment. Soon enough, he felt her body twitching as well as straining to stay in this position. So he changed positions in order to make her feel better. He laid on top of her as he pushed inside her folds and increased his speed to make her move with him. Her melons had bounced as well as moved crazily as his speed was increasing. He watched as her face had shown many looks as she finally settled with having her tongue sticking out of her mouth with her eyes in the back of her head. Once more, he changed the position as she came all over his PP as he placed it inside her folds once more. "Wow, I never thought that you'd be this good," Osami said as she thought that he finished. "I haven't come yet," Izuku said as she stared at him in horror, and true to his word, he was still at full mast. "Maybe we can continue this later?" she asked as he stared at her. "You got me all worked up and are going to try and get away now? That's not how this works," Izuku yelled as he placed her in a mating press and did her hard. As he pounded harder and harder, her voices became louder and louder as she came over and over again all over his body as he pushed her legs above her head. He moved his face to be at the same place as hers as he kissed her passionately as he increased his speed as his PP entered her stomach and smacked it all up. "I'm going to release it," Izuku groaned out after ending the kiss. "Release it. Do it inside," Osami said, looking at Izuku with heart-shaped eyes. "Are you sure? This is called the mating press for a reason," Izuku said as he continued moving. He felt his end coming really fast, and it was really close. He could feel his PP enlarging second by second. "Yes, I'm on the pill, and if I get preg anyway, then that's my punishment for getting you worked up," she called out with hearts in her eyes. "All right, Izuku yelled as he pumped himself one more time into her folds as he released inside. Gwaha! Oh my goda! That washamashing! Osami called out, blushing and smiling happily. Lemon over. Izuku pulled out of Osami as he stared at her, before pulling the covers over them as he fell asleep with her in his arms. All in all, it was a good day for our resident Red Dragon Emperor, and Dreyig was seemingly happy that his host was spreading his genes to all kinds of women in the world. Soon he would have a descendant that was alive and could reclaim his spot as the heavenly dragon of domination. Dreyig smirked from inside the boosted gear as he watched his host sleep with one of his women. Keep going, you're almost free from your past. Izuku Midoriya, my partner in arms, Dreyig said as he fell asleep for the night. Izuku was waking up from his night with Osami as she was sleeping on his chest. Looking in her eyes as she woke up, she smiled at him as he hugged her close to him as he got out of bed, heading to the shower. You know that baby face you have doesn't compensate for how evil you are in bed, Osami said, as they both entered the shower together. Please don't remind me. I am not that good in bed. I just never thought about that kind of thing before, and tried something new since it is different compared to Lady Yasaka. Izuku said, looking away blushing. Do we need to keep an eye for the Norse? Osami asked, curious. No, I wouldn't do that, Izuku said, as he looked away from her. As they were in the shower, Murayama and Kates were sitting outside of the bathroom as they overheard the duo having their conversation, and they overheard how Osami thought that Izuku was a real villain when in bed, causing their faces to become blushing messes. As soon as the shower was complete, Osami left the bathroom whilst Izuku was changing inside of it, and both girls got a good look at Izuku naked as their faces became as red as vital fluid before having nosebleeds and passing out. Izuku walked over to the main room, where Lady Yasaka was as he entered the room to find her brushing Kunu's hair. As the woman looked over at him, she found him staring at the scene with somewhat longing eyes. Are you all right, Izuku? Yasaka asked curiously. Yes, I'm fine. Just getting ready to head over to Norway to head over to the Norse faction. I want to learn how to fight as a Norse warrior. If I can have the confidence of a Norse warrior, as well as the magical prowess of one of their most powerful Valkyries, then I can become the strongest Red Dragon Emperor, Izuku said, walking near the wall as Yasaka finished her brushing. Well, since I am finished in dealing with my daughter's hair, I can make the magical circle to send you to Norway. I will make sure that the other end will be near the gates of Asgard, and you will make the rest of your journey, Yasaka said as she created the circle. Izuku looked at her as he watched the magic circle had been completed, and once it was ready, she looked over at Izuku. It's done. I will see you within the next year or so. I hope your journey is filled with happiness as well as fun battles, Yasaka said as she hugged Izuku. Thank you for the hospitality. I will return here as I will be stronger than I am now. By the time I return, I will make sure that my job as your bodyguard will be done at complete efficiency, Izuku said, looking at her. Thank you for protecting us with your aura. You have been able to keep many enemies away from us with your massive aura, Yasaka said, as she pushed him into the magic circle, and Izuku disappeared into the magic circle as all that was left of him was his shirt. Should have completed the circle without thinking about his abs, Yasaka said, as we head over to Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku was inside of the snow-filled Norway without a shirt as he shivered a little. She could have made sure that I kept my shirt, Izuku grumbled before someone appeared before him. Who are you, young man? A woman asked. She wore natural Valkyrie attire, as she had silver white hair and aqua blue eyes, and stood at least another foot and a half above Izuku's head. I am Izuku Midoriya. I am the Red Dragon Emperor, Izuku said, bowing to the woman. Don't bow to me. Tell me why you are within Asgard's territory, the woman asked, looking at Izuku. I came here to train under you all. I wish to become the strongest Red Dragon Emperor in history, and learning how to use your faction's magic, as well as train under you all, will help me a lot, Izuku said, still bowing. I will need to bring you to Odin-sama. He will know what to do with you, the woman said, as Izuku looked at her. What is your name? Izuku asked. My name is Rosweiss, and I am the bodyguard of Lord Odin-sama, Rosweiss said proudly. I could use some confidence like that as well. Izuku mumbled as the woman looked at him. If you wish to learn how to have confidence in battle, then the one who should train you is Thor Odinson. He is the most prideful man within Asgard as well as trains all the time. Rosweiss said, as she led Izuku within the walls of Asgard. As Izuku looked around the place, he found figureheads of Viking history walking about the place as Izuku looked to Rosweiss to ask a question. Do all Vikings from history come here? Yes, this place is Valhalla for the Vikings, a place where their deaths had brought them to join our ranks. Rosweiss said, as they made their way to the main castle where Odin lived. As they walked around, Izuku heard some of the people around him talk about him being a new arrival. Hey, look at the new vital fluid. He's like a little kitten within this place. One of the Viking figureheads said, laughing, do you think he died? He could be a Viking youngling on the surface. Another calmer one said, as the others lost their laughs as they looked at him in cold fury. If he was killed by another Viking village, then that is outright wrong. Another one said, as Izuku kept his attention at Rosweiss. She was looking at him in concern since he did have some Viking qualities, such as his built body that was for war, but he had no weapons on his person. Soon enough, they arrived at the castle where Odin lived as they walked through its halls, and they arrived at the main hall where Odin could be seen leering at his wife, Frigg. Odin, I will tell you for the last time. I will not show my rack inside the royal court. The woman said, as Izuku looked at them with a weird look as he thought that the Frigg from the mythology would be different. His opinion of her was that she should be the goddess of love, marriage, and fertility, but to hear her talking about her rack like this out in the open where her loyal men and women stared at them like this was a normal event made him severely check his knowledge of them. As soon as Rosweiss called them out announcing her presence in the area, both gods looked over to them as they looked perplexed as to why. Rosweiss was present in the court. Rosweiss, dear, what brings you to the royal court? Odin asked, curious. I have someone who claims to be the Red Dragon Emperor who came here on his own volition. Rosweiss said, putting Izuku on the spot. As soon as she moved out of the way, he looked about the room with panic as his body trembled in the presence of so many gods as well as powerful warriors. His power is draconic in nature. But if he truly is the Red Dragon Emperor, will show himself to us all. Odin said, smirking, yawn. I was trying to sleep, old man. What do you need from an old fool like me? Drake announced his presence. Drake, not now. I need to impress the Norse gods in order to learn from them. Izuku mumbled to his left hand as Odin and Frigg stared at him in wonder. To think that he had enough stupidity to say that in front of us. He seems like a stupid fellow. Frigg thought, well, if it isn't Drake, why Gotch, the Welsh dragon of domination. It's been a few thousand years since your last host came here. Odin said, smiling. What was his idea in order to train under you all in order to increase his repertoire of magical abilities? His goal is to become the strongest Red Dragon Emperor who barely used my sacred gear. His power with it isn't that far behind, though, so he is trying to mostly be recognized for his natural strength before using mine. Drake said as everyone looked at the timid boy. What is your name, young man? Frigg asked, curious. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Izuku said, bowing to her. Do you have a job as of right now? Do you work for any faction at the moment? Odin asked, as Rosweiss looked stunned at what was happening at the moment. I currently work for Lady Yasaka. I am her bodyguard, and I came here specifically in order to become stronger than her, as well as become strong enough to protect those that I love. Izuku said, with conviction. Just as the two leaders of the faction were about to talk to him, someone entered the building as everyone sighed. Where is the Red Dragon Emperor? A blonde-haired young man called out. He had a Nordic helmet that had wings on the top of them that looked eerily similar to a certain Japanese hero that Izuku was trying to avoid at the moment. But his eyes were blue in color as his muscular frame made him look like a juggernaut of a man, many times thinner than All Might himself, but also many times more powerful than the man with the strongest quirk in the world. Why must you be like this, Thor? Frigg asked, as Thor looked at his parents. What? I am merely searching for a good opponent. Fighting the Red Dragon Emperor is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thor called out laughing. He seems lively. Izuku thought to himself before Drake called himself out. If I would advise you to calm yourself before my current host. He is many times weaker than you are at the moment, and if he were to fight you, he would lose outright without you even trying, Drake said, causing the young god's face to transform into a battle-ready smile. Well, if you are here, Red Dragon, then I can train him in order to increase his overall strength, power, endurance, as well as dexterity, Thor said, as Odin looked at Frigg for some answers. Well, as long as you don't kill the young lad, then you can train him. But Rosweiss, you will have to train him in the magical aspect of the Norse magics. Frigg said, I will do my best, my lady. Rosweiss said, as Izuku bowed before the gods themselves. Izuku sat in the battle arena between Rosweiss and Thor as they both stared at him with trepidation. Thor was watching Izuku closely as Izuku's body language showed that he was extremely timid, as well as analyzing both him and Rosweiss. He gained a battle-craving smirk as he thought of all the strategies that the young man could cook up within their first fight. Not only that, but what power he would use in their first training session. But they had a crowd watching them from around the arena as they wanted to see who would win between the Red Dragon and their faction's prince. All right, young man. You will be fighting me whilst I am using at least 15% of my power. And I need you to punch me in the face with as much power as you can. Go full power as well as attack with all your moves before you attack Rosweiss with your full magical might. As soon as that is over, we will show you our power, Thor said, as Izuku nodded his head. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker, Izuku and Drake called out. As Izuku boosted his power with Drake's assistance to the maximum, as Izuku showed his draconic aura blasting the area around them to ash. Thor stood within the aura without even flinching as only a couple thoughts came to his mind as he stared at the young boy charging his power to the maximum. His power is insane compared to the leaders of some Viking villages. Not only that, but his draconic aura is turning everything into ash. Thor thought to himself as he looked over at Rosweiss and watched as she literally needed a magic shield in order to defend herself. She needs more training if this amount of power is burning through her barrier. His power is admirable for being so young. It's making me fired up. Oops, his power went over my 15%. I will need to increase it to 25%, Thor said, as Izuku's power reached his maximum. Izuku then launched over to Thor's position as he let out a punch that at the last second, Thor heard Drake call out penetrate, as Izuku's punch penetrated his natural defenses and sent him flying back into the wall behind himself. As he got back up, he wiped his face with his left hand, and as he looked down at his fist, he found vital fluid leaking from it as he spit out a wad of vital fluid from his mouth as he smiled at the boy. Well, that was a good hit. Nasty left hook you got there, young Drake. But it's clear that you need a fighting style in order to match that power in your strikes. I will teach you this in due time. Now launch your max power without the balance breaker and punch me afterward, Thor said, smiling with a battle-crazed smile on his face that scared Izuku shitless. Looking at Rosweiss, she nodded her head as she kept her magical barrier around herself as Izuku powered down from his balance breaker and powered up with his Tuki and Senjutsu as he pulled out a blast from his hand. Dominating. Dragons. Blaster. Izuku screamed as a huge, massive power came out of his left hand as it zoomed towards Rosweiss' barrier as she held it up. As the blast hit her shield, she watched as the runes placed inside of the barrier, slowly wilting away from the fiery blast of the attack as she worked to increase their defense. As soon as that was finished, she watched as her new runes were slowly wilted away as Izuku's blast had dissipated. She looked over at him as he looked somewhat burnt out from magic use, and she watched as his face morphed from worry to relief that he didn't kill her on accident. Nice attack. You nearly destroyed her barrier with your most powerful attack. That's what happens when Senjutsu and Tuki are combined into one nasty attack. Now use both fighting powers against me, without the boosted gear, and punch me once, Thor said, as Izuku nodded his head. As Izuku powered up to maximum once again, he managed to barely get Tuki and Senjutsu to combine one more time as he flew towards Thor and punched him in the gut. But there was a small problem with his attack. His fist hit Thor's gut, but Thor looked at him with intrigue as he stared at Izuku with curiosity. "Is it your maximum power and base?" he asked, as if the punch didn't even faze him. "Yes." Izuku stuttered, now fearful. Well, I guess I could show you a real punch. Worry not, I will not kill you with it. I will merely knock you out, and you will be asleep for about a few hours. You will get dinner before going to bed where you will learn how to increase your power and strength in the morning with me," Thor said, as Izuku looked at him with surprise. "Thank you for training him," Izuku said, thanking him before getting punched in the gut, causing him to cough up and spittle as he collapsed to the ground. The last thing he heard was, He survived 2 punches at 30% strength. He didn't feel the first one. His dexterity must have been insane. But how did that work? From Thor before everything went black. Izuku woke up inside of a room as he looked at the area surrounding himself. Moving around the room to get a look at whose room this belongs to, he looked at some pictures that were scattered about, and he found that they were from Rosweiss during her time as a trainee of the Valkyries. As he smiled at them, as he looked at a particular picture, he couldn't help but find out something about it that confused the hell out of him. Getting a closer look, there was a young man standing next to her, as he had black, scraggly hair that couldn't be tamed by anything. He had black eyes with a smirk on his face. He had an ensemble of freckles dotting all over his cheeks, as well as nose, and Izuku knew that this man was eerily similar to a picture that his mother had at his home back in Kuo. Seems like the world is smaller than it seems," Izuku muttered as he heard the door to the room open up. It was shown to be Rosweiss as she walked into the room with a pail of water and a rag hanging from the side of it, as she stared at Izuku in shock at how he was awake at the moment. Hi?" Izuku asked, as Rosweiss walked over to him and felt his forehead and sighed in relief. "What's wrong?" Izuku asked worriedly. "After you were knocked out by Thor, you gained a high fever and replaced a bed. I was just surprised that you were awake right now. Not only that, but your fever is still there. Your temperature is over 100 degrees Fahrenheit." Rosweiss said, "Well, I've always been told by my mother that I've always been a really hot baby. Maybe that is why, or maybe it was Drake," Izuku said, muttering a little. Thinking about it, Rosweiss did come to the same conclusion until Izuku opened his mouth before talking about the man in the picture she had. "Hey, that man in the picture you have looks really familiar to me. What's his name?" Izuku asked, confused. "Oh, his name is Hisashi Midoriya. He told me that he was traveling the world in order to find something for his son back in Japan," Rosweiss said, as Izuku stared at her in shock. "What's wrong, Midoriya-san?" Rosweiss called out as Izuku nearly fainted on the ground. "That man in the picture, did you see what he really looked like? Did he tell you his son's name?" Izuku asked, holding her shoulders. "He looked like he does in the picture. And as for his son, he said that his son's name was Izuku Midoriya," Rosweiss said, before stopping in her tracks looking at Izuku. As she got a closer look at Izuku, as she took in his look, as she compared them to the picture that she had of Hisashi Midoriya. Once getting her own closer look, she found that the freckles dotting Izuku's cheeks were a distinct match to Hisashi's own, and his subtle plain face was similar to Izuku's own face as well. "You're Hisashi's lost son," she called out, as Izuku looked at her confused. "Lost son?" Izuku asked, as she stared at him in even more shock. "Your mother, didn't she tell you about who your father was?" Rosweiss asked, concerned. "All she told me was that he was going around the world in search of treasures and jobs that were looking to hire him," Izuku informed her. Rosweiss was now even more concerned with Izuku's upbringing, since she had felt some energies near Hisashi's son that wasn't good in nature, as well as all the problems he was having in Kuo town. "Well, we shouldn't keep Thor waiting on your next training session," Rosweiss said, as she left Izuku to change out of his clothes and get into training gear. Izuku left the changing room as he found Rosweiss looking at him from afar as she went back into her studies of Norse magic. Izuku stood in the ring of the arena as Thor made his way into it, as he held some weapons that Izuku could learn how to use for battle. "Nice to see you awake, young Drake. But our first sparring session was just a mere workout compared to what we're doing today," Thor said, placing the weapons on the ground. As Izuku walked over to the weapons, Nothing came out to him as he looked them over, and as he got closer to one of them, they shined brightly as he was near it. The weapon was an old katana that was forged from the power of a dying star from Nidavellir. The forgery was perfect, as well as the carvings of the name on the blade. As Izuku moved to hold the blade, it shined brighter as Izuku placed his hands over them. Once the brightness of the blade had subsided, Thor was impressed that Izuku was capable of wielding the blade. "What you've done was incredibly impressive, young man. That blade is called Graham. It seems like it knows your heritage in being Japanese and changed its shape to be what you needed it to be," Thor said as he smirked at the boy. As Izuku moved away from the table, nobody but Izuku noticed a seemingly sad glow coming from a shield that was underneath the blade Graham. As Izuku moved away from the table, the shield seemingly had a mind of its own and flew over to Izuku, as Thor and Rosweiss had saw it move on its own as Izuku caught the shield in his arm as he stared at it in awe. "What just happened?" Rosweiss asked, completely confused. "I was testing out a theory, but it seems like this shield wanted me to hold it," Izuku said as he watched the shield shine and become a perfect, rounded golden shield. "I need to see my father about this development. I will head out from here, start running around the place, as well as doing push-ups after doing 5 laps around the arena. By the time I get back, we will spar," Thor said, uncharacteristically serious, as Izuku nodded his head and got to training. Thor left without any kind of cheer as Rosweiss looked at the young god in confusion as Izuku was seen running around the place. Inside the main hall of Odin's home, the old man was seen playing poker with one of his guards that guarded his room. It was here that Thor made his presence known to both of them as they looked in his direction in bewilderment at why Thor came in unannounced as well as completely serious. "Thor, my son, what brings you to see me right now?" Odin asked curiously. "Can someone please explain why the Red Dragon Emperor has Asgardian DNA?" Thor yelled as Odin looked at him in shock. "What are you talking about, son?" Odin demanded as Thor explained the sight he saw outside in the arena before he was about to train Izuku. "You're telling me the shield of Jormungandr had just flew over to the boy without any signal, and the boy said he was testing a theory?" Odin asked. "Yes, it was completely amazing. From all the legends of the shield, it was stated that it would only react to Asgardian DNA, and all of Asgard had tried and failed to collect the shield, and now a brat who hasn't been here for 2 days managed to get it under control in under a mere second," Thor said before another person arrived in the room with scuff marks on his clothing. "Loki, what brings you here?" Odin asked, bewildered. "That red dragon asked me to spar with him, and he managed to get some clean hits with his power. But overall, Thor needs to train him with his Asgardian powers. He doesn't seem to understand his legacy that is running through his veins," Loki said as he smirked at his father. "Who is his father?" Thor and Odin asked at the same time. In the arena a few minutes ago, Izuku was seen doing push-ups in the arena after completing his runs all around the arena 5 times. He was in the middle of his training when a young-looking man walked over to Izuku as he stared at him in awe. "How did you get Jormungandr to follow your whims?" the man asked, as Izuku got jump-scared by his literal presence, screamed, and moved away into a fighting stance. "Well, if it's a battle you want, then it will be a battle you'll receive," the man called out as Izuku went for the attack. Punch after punch was landed on the god, as Izuku sent the man skidding a few feet away from him as they clashed punches as well as kicks. When it came down to magic, the god was the better fighter since he was more experienced in fighting with magic than Izuku was, but was surprised when he felt something wrong with his godly essence being messed with and looked at the aura of Izuku. He found Izuku's aura being somewhat white mixed in with a light tunnish gold color. And only one face came to his memory as he remembered a familiar black-haired man with freckles dusting his face as he fought the god. "All right, this match is over," the young god said, knocking Izuku out on the ground with a chop to the neck. Leaving an unconscious Izuku in the arena, the young god was leaving when he heard a voice he thought was long gone forever. "It's been about 2,000 years since we last met." "Loki," a deep masculine voice called out. "Drake? Is this boy your newest host?" the now-named Loki asked, concerned. "Yes. And can you tell me about what is going through your mind?" "Who does my host remind you of?" Drake asked, confused. Hisashi Midoriya, one of the most powerful Asgardians within Asgard. He died in battle a few years ago against a villain named All for One. But I don't know where his body is, although I'm glad the young man died a worthy fight against someone so powerful. Loki said as the next words out of Drake's mouth was concerning. What are you talking about, feeble god? All for One was Izuku Midoriya's father. Drake said, morbidly confused. Hisashi Midoriya is the true father of Izuku Midoriya. Why would All for One be Izuku's father? Loki asked, looking at the hand gauntlet. Because All for One stated it himself. Unless he was lying, I know the monster wasn't lying when he told me that. I was using my magic in order to know more about him through his words. Either he really seems to think he is Hisashi Midoriya, or he is powerful enough to manipulate Izuku's weak mind as of right now to say that. Drake said, as Loki sighed in anger. To think that monster got close to Hisashi's own son in order to lie to him. Unspeakable. I will talk to my father at once. He will make sure that this All for One is dealt with personally. Loki said, leaving the area as Izuku slowly was returning to the land of the living. Ouch, what the hell happened? Izuku asked as he fully woke up. Partner, it seems like we have a conversation that needs to be addressed. Drake said, as Izuku looked at his wrist in trepidation. What do you mean? Izuku asked. All for One isn't your father. He was the man who took your father's life and used his form in order to look like your real father. Drake said, as Izuku stared at his left hand in shock. You mean that Japan's worst villain was extremely close to me and my mother, that we could have died there? Izuku asked worriedly. I'm sorry to say, partner, but your mother isn't the mother you will remember her to be. Shortly after she had left, and after you left Kuo, she had called the police in order to get you arrested. Drake said, shocking the boy even further. With how white Izuku's face was, he was not only hit with two major bombshells of information, but it was so much that Izuku couldn't handle the information and promptly fainted from too much information. It wasn't until a few hours later that Izuku woke up with very dull eyes. He had been summoned into the sacred gear in order to find out more info about what his mother had been doing behind his back, and he found out many horrifying things that he didn't wish to think about. It wasn't until Thor came into his bedroom with a hero suit with him that called Izuku's attention to the man. Good morning, young man. I'm glad that you got enough sleep, because you won't be training with me today. In fact, you will be becoming a vigilante in order to make your own legend within your hometown. Thor said, smiling at Izuku. Looking at the tall blonde man, Izuku deadpanned at him as he thought about the consequences of if he got caught in that town. You are aware that the heroes and villains are searching all over for me, right? Izuku asked. Yes, I do. It is because of this fact that they'd never know that it was you being a vigilante in Mizudafu itself. Put this hero suit on, and I will teleport you into Mizudafu, and you will begin your mission, Thor said, as Izuku looked at the god in confusion. What is my mission? Izuku asked. Your mission is to see how long it takes to take you down and get you into the Mizudafu precinct, and once that happens, I will come in and teleport you away, Thor said, as Izuku nodded his head. As the door closed behind him, Izuku took a look at the costume and found it to be a really cool design, as well as it being based off of one that was in his notebook for hero analysis on himself. And there were some differences to the costume, such as the wrist being non-existent since he has a sacred gear, and the mask had rips and tears on the ears that seemed like bunny ears. This is just going to make me underestimated by my opponents. But I can use that to my advantage. Izuku mumbled as he put the hero suit on and looked in the mirror. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he found that he looked pretty cool, as he had been looking like a really cool hero. Thor came into the room and found Izuku standing doing poses that looked Asgardian in nature. What is your vigilante name, young Midoriya? Thor asked, causing a small shriek to come from Izuku as he held his heart. My vigilante name will be Red Dragon, Izuku said, as he was teleported into Mizudafu. Izuku landed on top of a building within Mizudafu as he thought about the mission that Thor put him on. Make sure that you last as long as possible before getting caught. It is your mission in order to show them heroes what it really means to be a hero in the night as well as day. It is your choice whether or not you do your heroing duty during the day or night. Make sure that you're not caught before the end of the month. Get started, brat. Once you do that, you will be an honorary Asgardian. Thor laughed before kicking Izuku into the portal. Well, no time like the present. Izuku mumbled as he made his way over to the city of Central Mizudafu. As he ran toward the fire escape, he made sure to get a mental map of Mizudafu once again, since he hasn't been here since the start of summer. Meaning that he doesn't know about the newest parts of the school year, since the kids nowadays are in hero schools. Maybe he could check in on Kakin? He would be in Yui, right? Izuku would think to himself. As he walked over to the school, he would find that there was reporters surrounding the school as they talked about the latest news about what happened. As it would turn out, it has been about 2 weeks since the attack of Yui was shown to the world. For what he overheard from the reporters, the school's faculty had just announced that they weren't prepared for such a large-scale battle from the villains at that point in time and were unwillfully unprepared. Not only that, but there weren't any kind of casualties except for the injuries of pro-hero Eraserhead, as well as pro-heroine number 13, as they were incredibly injured during the attack, before All Might had come in to save the day. When Izuku heard the name of All Might, he sighed in relief, since he never held anything against the man, as he was just trying to steer Izuku on a different path. Izuku knew that becoming a hero was almost impossible for him in a world of quirks, and Izuku was fine with being the bodyguard of Lady Yasaka when his training was complete. Walking away from the school, nobody even noticed his presence as he walked away in his vigilante garb, except for a certain principal of the school who was watching from his camera systems. Later on, Izuku went about the city as he saw many people watching villain fights that he watched the other heroes take care of. He was smiling at being back to his original home as he walked the streets, getting the mental map memorized in his head. He reached a certain point of his journey as he arrived in front of school, where his journey into the supernatural began truly for him. Aldera Junior High School, a school where Izuku's many demons lived, a school where he was treated as less than human for learning at their school. He really wished that he couldn't ever relive those days as he walked toward his old home and found his old apartment. When he looked into the apartment, he found that nobody lived there and made sure that his name was changed in order to dodge anyone trying to ID him whenever he got the apartment for him to live in once more. He managed to get a job at a florist shop in order to get some money in order to live off of food and water. He didn't care for the fact that there was no beds inside. He just needed to continue his training in order to start that night to debut to the world about Red Dragon. All right, Drake, I will need you to do the talking whenever we encounter a villain, Izuku said, as Drake merely hummed. I will do the hard job of doing vigilante work while you do the talking. I don't wish to be found out so soon, so using your voice would be preferable than my own. Plus, your voice is more intimidating, Izuku said, as he lay on the ground in sweats. The sun was lowering down on the horizon as Izuku put his vigilante clothes on as he summoned his sacred gear onto his left hand. Are you sure that you want to do this, partner? Drake asked, concerned. Yes, the longer they look around for someone who has a similar voice to you, the better. That way I can save more lives by the day, Izuku said, as he jumped out the window and headed off for the center of Mizudafu. He was genuinely surprised by the fact that more people were in danger during the evenings as well as nights as he took down villain after villain before anyone could see him. All he left behind was a mere piece of paper that said his vigilante name, Red Dragon. But when someone saw him truly, they only saw his bright red gauntlet that was shown off on display whenever he fought his opponents. As Izuku was taking down a persistent villain on the street, he felt someone behind him as he called to Drake. To whom am I speaking to? I know you're there, Drake called out. As the figure came out of the dark, it was shown to be a villain who stood at least 6 feet tall and about a couple inches more. He had scales all over his body as he towered over Izuku, and he pulled out a blade from his back. I am here to take you down, brat, the scaled villain said, as Izuku merely looked over at him. I personally believe that I am many millennia older than you, little lizard, Drake mocks. Once the barbs were thrown at the other, they both went for the attack as Izuku tried to use his weaker attacks, thinking that if he used too much power, he would kill them. He didn't think too much as he dodged and weaved through his opponent's strikes with his blade as he managed to hit Izuku in the face of his mask as the villain laughed in victory. Huh, take that. Next time think about why I am the head honcho of this place. The villain said, pulling his fist back, walking away. Seriously, is that all you got? Drake called out, as the villain turned around to look at Izuku. The villain was stunned by the fact that Izuku was right behind him, grabbing his tail and tossing him into the street as the villain was brutally beaten into the ground. As he was slammed into the ground, he was told the name of the vigilante. My name is Red Dragon. Remember it next time you are in my territory, Drake said before Izuku leaped away. Izuku waited on top of a building as a police officer looked around for the person responsible for the defeat of this villain. As he looked up, he found Izuku striking a pose, that of a dragon looking at its prey, as his hands were on the edge of the building as he stared at them. Behind his back, a pair of leathery webbed wings spread out as he flew off into the night, as a mere piece of paper landed in his hands. The police officer looked at the paper and it read, "Hello, officer. I was minding my own business when that villain attacked me. I don't have a quirk, but I am a new vigilante making Mizudafu my new territory. The name is Red Dragon, and I hope you remember me. I will be staying for around a month before leaving. Hope you have fun trying to take me down." The officer looked at the sleeping villain before sighing and cuffing them and taking them away. Eraserhead isn't going to like that someone else is laying claim to this territory, was their only thought as they left for the Mizudafu precinct. Izuku was next seen on another building as he moved about the night, flying in the skies. He saw multiple people running about the night as they were heading home. He even stopped an illegal trafficking ring all on his own, as bullets never really hurt him since his skin was replaced with scales that came out whenever a bullet hit his skin. He was beginning to have a lot of fun as a vigilante, but as soon as he checked the time, he decided to call it quits for the night before getting some sleep. With him working 4 hours a night for this, he needed sleep in order to keep himself within the time frame of going to work in the morning. Arriving at his apartment, he walked through the front door as he took off his vigilante garbs, revealing some pretty green hair that had black roots. He looked over at the mirror as he saw the bags under his eyes. "I can't keep doing that forever," Izuku mused as Drake put his 2 cents in. "You may not, but there are more people in danger at night, and there aren't many underground heroes working nowadays," Drake said as Izuku nodded his head. "I will try to get some time as a vigilante during the day after I get off work. If I want them to try and catch me, I need the daylight heroes to know about my presence in Mizudafu as well," Izuku said as Drake huffed in agreement. Heading to sleep, they were blissfully unaware that a certain hero had decided to keep an eye on them from the shadows. Mizudafu Precinct, Japan. A man with black hair and a growing stubble on his chin sat his office chair as he heard the news of a new vigilante from his right-hand Sansa, a cat quirk police officer that received a call from the same vigilante that took down a villain that they'd been trying to take down themselves. Not only that, but they had a power that was similar to Hawk's in that he could fly, but the name was more similar to Dragoon hero Ryukyu, as she had a draconic quirk, and the vigilante had a name called Red Dragon. Not only that, but Sansa had told him that when he saw the vigilante, he thought that he was staring at the ultimate predator in the world, a dragon. The detective was sitting in his chair as he told this to a man with a scarf hanging over his neck as he had hair as dark as night and eyes that wished for sleep. "So, Detective Tsukachi, what are your thoughts on this new vigilante?" the man asked as he drank some coffee. Even whilst injured, he was willing to do some hero work during the night. "I personally don't think that he was lying about staying in Mizudafu for around a month. If we can catch him and take him in for answers, then we can find out what we can do then," the now named Tsukachi said. "Do you know anything else about him?" a small creature asked curiously. "Nizu, how many times do I have to tell you? If I knew what he looked like, I would tell you. But you'd have to ask Sansa. He was the one who told me this information," Tsukachi said, sighing as he drank some more coffee. "I will do that right now," the principal of Yui said, happily. Leaving the room, the man who desperately looked like he needed sleep looked over at Tsukachi. "So you need me to see if I can stop his quirk? Is that right?" he asked. No, for what the note said, he stated that he was quirkless. I don't know whether or not to believe him on that statement, but from what we're seeing, he has a flying quirk at the least, Tsukachi said. "Well, inform me when you need my assistance," Eraserhead said, getting up from his chair as the principal entered the room. "By the way, Tsukauchi, can you do a run in the database for this free character?" Nizu asked as he revealed a picture of Izuku in his vigilante costume. The detective searched the database as he found nothing of the sort in the system as he gave that info to Nizu. "Well, it seems like this vigilante and this new person inside Mizutofu are probably one and the same. Keep an eye out for this same costume," Nizu said as Eraserhead and Tsukauchi nodded their heads. Their month was about to get worse as they looked out the window of Tsukauchi's office before leaving. As Nizu and Eraserhead entered their vehicle, Nizu asked Eraserhead a singular question that put him on guard. "Do you think that this person is related to the League of Villains?" "Why would you ask that?" Eraserhead asked. "Because he was walking just outside the barrier of the school near some reporters this morning. I wanted to be clear that he is to be put under watch. Maybe have some of your students chase after him during the night of his escapades in order to see who he is," Nizu said, cackling. Off in a certain florist shop, Izuku sneezed as he felt like someone was talking about him as an old woman asked if he was all right, with Izuku explaining that someone was probably talking about him as Nizu's car passed the store. Izuku had finished watching the sports festival once again as he looked at each and every quirk that was used in the events. He was happy that his old friend and enemy Katsuki had been capable of getting into the school that he was incapable of getting into as of this moment. He was also in the middle of his analysis of the rest of Class 1A as they were fighting in the tournament when he got a knock at his door from his landlord. Opening the door, he was shown an old man who looked at him with a somber look on his face. "As much as I know that your job isn't giving you much money, young man, I need to make sure that this month's rent is collected at the end of the month," the elderly man said as he stared at Izuku. "Don't worry, old man. I got this month's rent right here," Izuku said as he gave the rent to the old man. "Thank you, young man. Some other people here could use an attitude as nice as yours as well as paying their bills on time. You will become a great man for any woman out there," the old man said, patting Izuku's shoulder softly. Closing the door to the apartment, Izuku looked around for his vigilante costume as he thought to finish his analysis later. Putting on his vigilante gear and jumping out of the window, he never noticed that the old man watched him jump from his window with a fond smile on his face. Izuku jumped from building to building as he ran across the city looking for people in need. He found many on his way towards the city center as he saved people from muggings, as well as certain villains who attacked tram stations. He had taken down multiple banks that were in the process of being robbed and captured the villains doing the robbing. As he left the area with a simple moniker of a red dragon painted on the wall, everyone looked at it as a sign of protection from the recently new vigilante. As Izuku was running across the alleyway in Hosu, he had been looking at the new vigilantes that had joined the area in search of people to attack or defend. But Izuku just had the luck of running into Stain the hero killer as he had been in his process of trying to kill another hero. He landed in front of the hero killer as said killer looked him in his emerald eyes through his mask. "You are the new vigilante Red Dragon. You save people from any and all crimes." "Why?" Stain asked as he pointed his serrated blade at the young man. "We're merely trying to save people. Not having a license to save people isn't going to stop us from our wish to at least help people," Drake said, as Izuku, in his mind, mentally smiled at his friend for defending his dream. "Well, I can deem you as a worthy hero to be if you are capable of getting your host under the safety net of the hero society," Stain said, as he walked closer to Izuku. "What do you mean by that?" Drake asked, as Stain revealed his power of ki. "Don't think that I can't sense your power, boy. I know that you're only using your sacred gear to speak for you. It is a good strategy in order to keep others away from your true identity. Isn't that right, Midoriya Izuku?" Stain asked, as he watched Izuku's form stiffen from the name itself. "So I'm right about who you are. Why are you saving people when you have been stated that you've made notebooks to take down heroes in this society?" Stain asked once more. This time Izuku spoke before Drake could look into Izuku's memories as he took off his helmet. "I made those notebooks as a reference in order to make myself a better hero. My old friend Katsuki had used my notebooks as a reference to ruin my life in the hero world," Izuku said, looking at the ground as tears were coming out of his eyes. It hurt hard knowing that people thought that he was a villain as a vigilante, but to hear it from someone like Stain who killed horrible heroes for not becoming like the hero, All Might will always be kind of hurtful. Well, you're the kind of hero that doesn't need to be purged from this worthless society of fake heroes, Stain said, putting his blade away. Well, if that is over, we need to make sure that the hero listening to our conversation isn't allowed to escape with our voice, Drake said, as he forced Izuku to turn around to see Ingenium, who had already called for backup. Hero Killer Stain, I will bring your killings to an end, and with it, I will make sure that the people of Hosu don't have to suffer from your reign of terror ever again, Ingenium called out. As the hero attacked, both vigilantes, Izuku dodged out of the way as he merely twisted his body in place as Ingenium had attacked Stain first. As both hero and villain started to attack one another, Izuku decided to make his leave and make his way to find a new spot to save innocent civilians. But just as he was about to turn around the corner, Ingenium had attacked him out of fear that Izuku was going to attack other heroes. And as soon as Ingenium was around Izuku's position, he noticed how the boy had slowly turned around to look at him from his vision, and Ingenium had felt a fist in his back as he felt his back break from the punch to his spinal cord. As soon as he lost feeling in his legs, Stain had arrived to finish off the hero when he was kicked away. You will not kill Ingenium. He made sure that innocents were safe from any and all threats, Izuku called out, without realizing he used his real voice. As Stain had looked at Izuku with a look of pure anger as well as fury, he turned away and walked off before climbing a fire escape and ran off into the night. F it, Izuku said, as he walked over to Ingenium. Why did you save me from him? Ingenium asked, confused. You're a good hero. I've met another hero who was my idol. It didn't turn out well for me, but I'm sorry about what happened to your spinal cord. I didn't mean to snap it in half, Izuku said, picking up the hero and onto his back as he released his wings and flew to the nearest hospital. Leaving Ingenium in the care of the Hosu Hospital for Heroes, he ran across the night as he went back to his home in Mizuto-fu, unaware of the fact that a certain Ida brother will be after his head. Izuku woke up from his sleep after a couple days of a break and got his vigilante costume on before heading over to Hosu in order to stop Stain from killing more heroes. He never even noticed how a few hero students had noticed his ascent into the air as he flew off into the direction of Hosu. And because of this, it will have changed some decisions of young heroes in training to head there to help Ida with his mission of defeating the vigilante Red Dragon. Making his way through the night of Hosu, Izuku had fought multiple villains as well as other vigilantes who were trying to follow in Stain's footsteps. He was already being blasted by blue flames of a certain black-haired vigilante as he was trying to run away from Izuku. Unfortunately for him, Izuku's armor had been merely scuffed from the flames since his flames were many times hotter than his. So after knocking the vigilante out, he managed to get him to a police precinct in order to get him into a hospital in order to learn how to properly utilize his power. It wasn't until later on that night that he had run into multiple hero students in the city of Hosu as they were making sure that people were safe and sound from any and all threats. Izuku noticed that pro-hero native wasn't anywhere near the place as he searched the alleyway for the hero killer in his newest hunt. And it wasn't long before he found the hero killer about to kill the native hero, and he kicked the hero killer in the chest. As the man flew back into the garbage bins nearby, Izuku picked up the hero and moved away from the area in order to keep him from the hero killer. It wasn't until a few minutes later of flying that Izuku noticed that the hero killer was keeping pace with his flight speed as Izuku sped up. He finally made it to many heroes and hero students as he deposited the dying native onto a brown bob-cut-haired girl as she stared at his vigilante costume. Guys, it's the Red Dragon, she called out as everyone in her general area got into fighting stances. Pro-hero native is in bad shape. He was attacked by the hero killer Stain. You need to get the hero to safety in order to heal from his wounds, Drake called out. As the girl walked over to the Red Dragon, she noticed that his vigilante costume was oddly underneath his armor. Taking the hero away from the vigilante and walking off her allies had begun their assault on him as he dodges and weaves through their attacks, whilst keeping Stain off his back. It wasn't long before some other heroes arrived on the scene, mainly being an old man with a yellow cape as well as white hair and yellow domino mask over his eyes. But the most notable one being Endeavor, as he blasted fire at Stain and Izuku respectively. As Izuku was fighting to keep away from the pro heroes and hero students, Stain was fighting Endeavor with all his strength and power, but it was becoming apparent that he wouldn't survive. It wasn't long before the hero killer was killed by Endeavor after the killer of heroes had tried to stab the hero in the neck with one of his blades. While that was happening, Izuku was dodging and blocking attacks that were coming at him from all angles. He was stronger than all of them by a wide margin, but he was trying to not kill them all on accident with his overwhelming power alone. So he was trying to knock each and every one of them out. When he heard a voice he thought he would never hear since the beginning of the year of living in Kuo. "What is this guy made of?" a brash and angry voice called out, as everyone watched as Izuku's body twitched and froze at the voice. "Partner, what the hell are you doing?" Drake asked Izuku, concerned. Izuku's breath hitched as he mumbled out that it was Katsuki Bakugo of the Heroics course, causing the dragon to realize that Izuku being here will not be good for his health. Just as Katsuki was moving closer to Izuku, his body moved on its own as he tried to take to the skies, when he was kicked back down to the ground by a padded foot on his helmet's head. Once the smoke cloud was cleared, Izuku looked up in the sky to notice that a familiar rabbit heroine was in the area as she smirked at his body on the ground. "Great. Now not only do you have to worry about a man who will make you into a burning furnace, but a woman who will only wish to fight you to improve her own strength. Not only that, but my host is within the barriers of a mental breakdown," Drake said, muttering curses. It wasn't long before Izuku got up from the ground as he ran off, once again as the heroes and students chased after him. It wasn't long before his way out was blocked off from in front of him as a bunch of water-based heroes and heroines were blasting him with water as he was sent flying into a building next to them. Getting up from the ground once again, Izuku focused his power on escaping as soon as possible, unaware of the fact that the water pulse that blasted him into a building had taken his helmet of his head. And Drake was still too worried about his host's mental state in order to remember about his face that was still covered in his Vigilante costume's mask. But his real colored eyes were showing in the smoke as if he was a supervillain poised to attack. As Izuku walked out of the building, rolling his shoulders, it intimidated the other heroes and students as they watched him walk away from being blasted with hundreds of thousands of pressured waters blasted into his head like it was nothing. Standing in the middle of the street, everyone noticed that his mask was still on, but they could tell from the fires creating the lighting in Hosu that his hair was green with black roots. Izuku then got into a stance to run away once more when an explosion rocketed him into a new building as Izuku rubbed the back of his head in confusion. Looking back, he found Katsuki staring into his emerald eyes with his very own ruby-colored ones. The look in them were so manic that he looked like a wild animal hunting for his prey, unaware that Izuku was the real predator and not the prey. Standing back up once again, it wasn't until a new person arrived on the scene as he stared at the familiar green hair. "Do not fear, for I am here," a familiar voice called out. No. He can't see me like this," Izuku thought to himself as he tried to get away from the area before being smashed into the ground from above. Looking up, he saw that it was All Might standing in the air still with his hand outstretched in his direction. Getting back up once more again, it was starting to get annoying to Izuku about the many times he would be getting knocked to the ground. But he never noticed that his mask was knocked off his face as his green hair and freckles were shown to the world. This caused pause for everyone present in the area as they found the S-class villain that was announced to the world a few months ago having ran away. Now that he was back, All Might looked in horror as Izuku looked back at him with a fearful look as well as a sad look on his face at the same time. As Izuku got ready to flee once more, All Might had placed his hands on Izuku's shoulders as he stared into Izuku's eyes. "Young man, why are you attacking heroes?" All Might asked softly. "I'm not attacking them. I was defending myself. I'm sorry for what happened a few months ago," Izuku said, not sure why he was apologizing. "Young man, why are you apologizing?" All Might asked, for the sludge villain incident. I only got in the way of the real heroes, Izuku said, as he tried to pull away from the hero. What were you doing the day you were ousted as a villain? All Might asked, concerned. I was heading home. I only heard about what Katsuki said about my notebooks being for villainous deeds when I arrived home and immediately left home in order to escape from something that I was framed for, Izuku said, as he couldn't stop the tears as inside the boosted gear, Drake had pulled each and every feeling Izuku felt about that day out. He really was working overtime in order to make Izuku show how he really felt about it, since Izuku never talked about it in order to heal from that moment in his life. As All Might looked at Katsuki, the boy was staring at Izuku in both shock and surprisingly anger and fury. What is your opinion of Katsuki Bakugo? All Might asked once more. It was here that Izuku's face became more fearful as he looked the number one hero in the face as he merely asked one thing. Please keep him away from me, Izuku said, as Katsuki was already in the air at that moment as he prepared a blast to hit Izuku in the back of the head with. Izuku jumped back away from Katsuki as the young man had launched attack after attack on him in order to shut him up about everything the young man had done. All Might had looked on at the scene with sad eyes as he had felt guilt for destroying Izuku's dream 1 year ago, and he made a decision to make him leave the realm of vigilantism. As he moved forward, he had noticed that Izuku looked in his direction as if he sensed his movement and jumped into the fray in order to stop him from escaping. He had already lost a potentially great successor to young Togata. He will not lose another one here to the police as well as prison. So he attacked Izuku in the name of clearing his name in the police as well as making sure that he could escape from them without the seemingly weird quirk that the young boy had. Izuku had dodged and weaved through each attack that All Might and Katsuki launched at him when he was kicked in the back by Mirko, as she had found him lacking in his awareness. As Izuku made to dodge any and all attacks from everywhere, the rest of Class 1 had made it their mission in order to stop this so-called Izuku from causing more chaos in the world. With the entirety of Class 1A and All Might with Mirko helping out from time to time, they had cornered Izuku down an alleyway, as Izuku had then revealed something about himself that none of them noticed. He spread his draconic wings in order to escape and had taken to the skies in order to flee from them, and he made it a fair bit of a distance away before All Might had landed on his back. Now don't get him wrong, Izuku is strong, ungodly strong since his training with Yasaka, Roswius, and Thor. But when someone lands on his back from above weighing around 600 pounds and they had already hit terminal velocity, he will be slammed down into the ground with a small crater. As All Might had jumped off of Izuku's body, he found the boy struggling to get up off the ground. Just as All Might was about to transform into his smaller form, Izuku looked at All Might in the eyes as he started to tear up. I just wanted to help people. Why can't I just be of use to others? Izuku struggled to say as he panted extremely heavily. I'm sorry, partner, for what is about to happen. A male draconic voice called out. What is about to happen? All Might asked, before everyone in the area who was nearby heard the sound of a dragon calling out. Reset. As soon as Drake had called this out, Izuku's vision blurred as he fell to the ground in a heap, just as one of the Class 1A students arrived. She had brown hair and a bob cut as she looked down into the crater and heard Drake call that out, and saw the green-haired boy collapse onto the ground. And using the training she had learned from Gunhead, she grabbed the boy and placed him in cuffs and heard him cough severely. As she placed the cuffs onto his wrists, Izuku, while extremely tired, looked at them before merely pulling to the sides and ripped them apart, before he picked her up in a bridal carry, causing her to blush madly before he placed her on her feet next to All Might. I forgive you for what you told me that day, All Might, but I need to leave, Izuku said, as he started to walk away with a slight limp in his left leg. Not wanting him to leave, once more All Might launched himself after the young man, whilst his charge had stared at the scene in a blushing mess. It wasn't long before the others had arrived from her class, and they charged after Izuku and All Might. The young girl had managed to stop a couple other girls in order to let them allow Izuku some kind of rest. Izuku found himself being kicked, punched, as well as blasted away from the main group as he felt his body beginning to fall apart from the inside. He felt one of his bones in his rib cage move a slight amount, which caused him to let out some air with a resounding crack that was heard from everyone. The one who had done it was surprisingly Shoto Todoroki, the young boy, who had decided to add some ice-powered punches and kicks that landed perfectly on Izuku's chest. Once he heard the cracking sound of Izuku's ribs, he immediately hesitated about what he had done when he heard Izuku shuffling to get back up once again. Looking at him, he found the green-haired young man coughing up some vital fluid as he stared at him with a manic smile. His personality was becoming mixed with Draig's at the moment in order to keep him alive. He launched himself at Shoto and managed to punch and kick through his ice defenses before letting out some fire breath, sending the young lad into Katsuki. Izuku stood before All Might as the tall man had looked at Izuku with guilt on his face as Izuku stared at All Might with a manic smile on his face. I forgive. Cough you for making sure I'd be safe. But my dream is to help others, no matter the cost, Izuku said, as he ran towards All Might as fast as he could, only to be bear-hugged by the tall man, as Izuku felt his bones creaking from the hug as his breath was quickly taken away and he was slowly losing consciousness. The last thing he heard from All Might was this: "I'm sorry for saying those words on that rooftop. I should have paid more attention to your situation at home, young man. I hope that whatever deity looks and protects you will forgive me." Before Izuku's vision went black, Izuku woke up in a hospital bed as he noticed that his left hand was placed in a quirk suppression cuff. He looked around the hospital room and found a man with black hair staring at him with black eyes that only wished for sleep. Izuku sat up in the hospital bed as he shook his head and looked around the room, only to find that there were some heroes out there looking at him with an angered expression. Merely shrugging his shoulders, the cuff fell off of his wrist, and the other heroes immediately went into action to keep him held down on the bed. "I'm not going to get off the bed. I am just trying to pop some bones," Izuku said, as the black-haired man looked at him with red eyes now. "Don't try to use your quirk. I am erasing it," the man said. Eraserhead, one of the better heroes of the world. "Don't waste your strength of your eyes. I don't have a quirk to even use," Izuku said, as the other heroes just stared at him in complete shock. "There's no way that you're not quirkless. You have wings as well as that gauntlet arm that you can use," Endeavor called out angrily. "Well, that's because that isn't a quirk," Izuku said, as he summoned the gear even with Eraserhead trying to erase it. "It's not leaving. That has to be a mutation quirk then," Eraserhead said, as Izuku looked at him with a weird look. "I told you it's not a quirk, and he has a name, you know," Izuku said, a little miffed. "What's its name?" Endeavor said, as Izuku growled at the hero. "His name is my name, is Draig Wygotch, and I am the Welsh Dragon of Domination, third only to Great Red and second only to Infinity Dragon God Ophis. And you are incredibly testing the patience of my host Endeavor." Draig growled. His voice carried power within it as he watched from Izuku's eyes, as every single hero had looked warily at Izuku as the gem on his left hand glowed. "I don't know what the hell is even going on, but my host needs to head back to Asgard in order to finish his training. He has a job in Kyoto that he needs to attend to," Draig said, as everyone looked at him with confused looks. "We need to arrest this villain for vigilantism," Endeavor called out, flaming up. "Please, you think those puny fireworks can scare my host? His flames burn hotter than even yours, and they can kill him if he uses them too much." Draig laughed at Endeavor. "You aren't in any kind of position in order to laugh at me, monster. I am the #2 hero of Japan, and I will make sure that this host of yours is placed in prison for the rest of his life." Endeavor growled, as if that prison you talk about could hold the likes of my host. He would be out before the day even ends if he is placed there. There is nothing you can do to him that he hasn't already suffered already, Draig said, back as Izuku got out of the bed, already sensing Thor on his way. As soon as they were about to drag him to the ground, a multicolored beam entered the room as a blonde-haired man with a small hammer appeared from it. "Haha, I never thought you'd last at least 2 months as a vigilante. You surprise me every time, Red Dragon Emperor," Thor said, as everyone tried to make sense of the man in front of them. Izuku moved to stand near Thor as he started up the multicolored beam once again in order to leave. "What's your name?" Eraserhead called out. "My name is Thor, and I hope that you don't bother my charge once again. It was nice meeting all of you. I will see you all in Valhalla one day when you die," Thor said, as Izuku and him disappeared from the room. Just as they left, Nizu had entered the room with Detective Tsukachi as they looked at the completely shocked heroes in the room, as Nizu looked at everyone with a mirth in his eyes that borderlined rage. "Where is the Red Dragon?" he yelled. As Izuku was in the arena training with his new weapons that were made by Itri, the golem from Nidavellir, he was noticing how he was not dying of the power coursing through his veins. "How are these weapons not even killing me? I should be suffering from mental anguish from holding such weapons, though," Izuku thought to himself as he trained himself. Thor had arrived as Izuku was showing his prowess with the weapons that were created for him as he increased his own strength rather than the strength he would have with the boosted gear. He still trained with his boosted gear, but he made sure that it was noticeably farther behind in terms of power. As he was training with Thor, Rosweiss had come into the arena in order to test the magic abilities he had learned from her as a test of his mettle for the Asgardians. She was impressed with his ability to recognize the danger in his area, and whilst fighting Thor to a standstill, he managed to make an Asgardian barrier around himself and Thor as their attacks got stronger and stronger. It became so strong that his own barrier had broken down from the shockwaves their punches had made on contact with one another once enough had been thrown at the other. "Izuku, the training that you are receiving from us is coming to an end within a week. What do you wish to do during that time frame?" Rosweiss asked, curious. "I want to spend that time learning all that I can about Asgardian magic, if I can master your race's magic. I can become one of the most powerful Red Dragon Emperors in history if I train hard enough," Izuku said, dodging an attack from Thor barely. Even Izuku had to admit that he was having fun fighting Thor, even though the Norse god of thunder had been holding back tremendously. With his physical abilities tested already to the limit, Thor stepped back as he nodded in approval of how well he was doing. "That will be the last time you train under me, Izuku. I will remember your name for the eons that would show your legend as the strongest Red Dragon Emperor in history. I cannot wait until you enter Valhalla and train with us for the rest of eternity as a god," Thor called out as he gave Izuku a hug. Izuku was a little confused about why he was receiving a hug from this god, but he reciprocated the hug as he nuzzled himself into it. Unknowingly, his draconic wings and tail came out as his tail wagged a little from the love he got. Even his ears became sharper as they twitched from the love. As Thor had left the arena in order to tell his father about Izuku's training in terms of physical training pertains to be complete, Rosweiss began to continue Izuku's training in the Asgardian magic, as well as the magic the Valkyries learned. Izuku was showing Rosweiss that he was an extremely fast learner, since he was showing signs of being a prodigy in terms of learning magic, as well as learning how to fight better than he normally would. He used to telegraph his attacks at the start, but over time he had managed to make sure that his movements were so fast it would take some time to get used to his fighting style. But then at the drop of a dime, he would change it, forcing you to take time to relearn before the process changed once again. He was becoming a better fighter, and quickly. So she wanted to make sure that his magic proficiency was as evolutionary as possible in order to utilize his magic in different ways to confuse his opponents whoever decided to fight him. She was going through her latest class when it was interrupted when someone with silver hair landed near her. "Who are you? And how did you get into Asgard?" Rosweiss called out angrily. She had even pointed a spear made of you at the young man as he looked around the place with a battle-hungry look. "My name is Vala Lucifer, and I want to become stronger than the current Red Dragon Emperor," the now named Lucifer said, as Rosweiss looked at the boy with a scrutinizing look. "I'm sorry, but I am currently teaching a student at the moment," Rosweiss said, as she pointed towards the outside of the arena. "If you wish to learn how to fight better, find Thor. He will be in the main hall talking to Odin-sama," Rosweiss said, as Valen nodded his head and left. As soon as they were away and far enough to not hear them, Drake decided to make his presence known to them. "That was the White One partner. Why didn't you engage with him?" Drake called out. That was because it felt like he was powerful enough to kill me when I wasn't using you. I didn't want to give up my cover as the Red Dragon Emperor of this generation. I want to be kept in the dark from his eyes until I am ready to fight him. Izuku said, as Drake huffed before heading back to sleep. Just make sure that you don't get killed early by him, all right? Drake said, falling asleep. Will do, partner, will do. Izuku said, getting back to his magic training. 5 days later, Izuku was in the arena as he was using the magic he had learned in the last 5 days with Rosweiss, and she couldn't be any prouder for him as his training was now complete. He had managed to cram all of the Asgardian's magical power and spells into his own mind without having to suffer headaches from the knowledge. In fact, he had managed to complete it the day before and used that time in order to learn the language of the Vikings that had become members of the Asgardians of the Norse faction. He was doing some minor training in order to make sure that his strength was up to par, since he was trying to maintain his power without the need to train to maintain it. He was going through some stretches as he saw Rosweiss walked up to him with a sad smile on her face looking down to him. She was amazingly tall as he became a little self-conscious about his own height of being 5 feet 5 inches, what with her being closer to being 5 feet 8 inches in height. Just the height alone is making him nervous when she looked down to his eyes as she held him close to her body as his face was thoroughly placed in her chest. Blushing red from the hug, he returns the hug, albeit more slowly, saying he was in her chest at the moment when Rosweiss speaks to him. Will you come back and visit Asgard? She asked, looking at Izuku in the eyes. I sure will. You were the best kind of teacher someone could ever have. And I am feeling something for you as well, but I don't have the strength to say it at the moment. Izuku said, muttering the last part of his sentence. Rosweiss did hear that, though, as she smiled at him before summoning the Bifrost in order to send Izuku back to the realm of humanity. See you later, Ross-chan, Izuku said, stepping into the Bifrost. As soon as he disappears from the sight of the young Valkyrie, the sight of her blushing face was all that we could see as we looked to where Izuku is at currently. Izuku appeared inside Norway as he was wrapping himself in his draconic aura that was gifted to him by Drake. He needed to stay warm in order to keep himself from getting frostbite from the cold winds of the country. He was at deep in the north. Arriving in an airfield, he finds that surprisingly, there was a plane waiting just for him to head back to the city of Kyoto. Seems like Yasaka-sama had thought of everything. I should give them all a call in order to tell them that I am on my way back home, Izuku said, pulling out his phone. As he pulled out his phone, he never noticed that there was a warp gate opening up behind him as a young man with hands all over his body was slowly coming up behind him. But as soon as he noticed the presence behind his body reaching out for him, he immediately turned around and sliced the offending person's hand off their arm as he cried out in pain. "Gah, is that how you treat your brother?" The young man with hands all over his body called out. "You're not my brother. Even that is apparent since we don't have the same hair color, eye color, not even the same parents." "Tamura Shigaraki," Izuku said, as the handman looked at him confused. "The hell are you talking about?" Tamura asked, confused. "I know that All For One tried to change my mindset when he came to my home that day 9 months ago. He tried to change all of my memories about my mother as well as past in order to turn me to villainy. But it didn't work since I was never wishing to become a villain in the first place," Izuku said, looking at Tamura. "But Sensei is your father," Tamura said, as Izuku drops a bombshell. "I may have never met my father, but I know that he, for a fact, had black scraggly hair similar to how mine looks. Not only that, but he had freckles all over his cheeks and nose, whilst I only have freckles on my cheeks. I knew that the moment All For One stepped into my home, that he was a villain masquerading as my father, especially since I know my father is really dead," Izuku said, as Tamura looked at him. "How do you know that?" he asked, trepidation coming in his mind. "All For One killed him back in the day when I was a little boy. I overheard some people talking that my dad was killed by the man because he saw potential in me to be a villain, especially since I was an All Might fan," Izuku said as he walked towards the plane. "We won't last long in Japan. I hope you know this," Tamura said, watching Izuku get on the plane. "I know, but if All For One decided to come after me, tell him that he will need every quirk in his arsenal in order to kill me, because I am coming for revenge if I find him," Izuku said, closing the door of the plane and taking off towards Kyoto. As Izuku's plane took off, Tamura stilled in the cold weather as he chuckled to himself as one thought came to his own mind. There is no way Sensei will ever lose to him. He's quirkless, and there is no way he could defeat Sensei without one. A few hours later, Izuku finds himself within the borders of Japan as he was heading into land in Kyoto as a tower called in on his radio. Unidentified objects state your reasoning for entering our airspace. Tower control. This is the unidentified object. I am flying a plane to your airport, and I need to make my way to Lady Yasaka, Izuku said as he heard some shuffling through the radio. You're clear to land. Tower out, the control tower said as Izuku landed his plane in the airport. Unknown to him, there was going to be some people waiting for him at the airport there in Kyoto, and it wouldn't be the kind that liked him. We look further into the airport as we find some heroes running about, as they called every agency near Yui in order to call any and all heroes to catch the wanted Vigilante Red Dragon. Izuku was flying the plane near the runway when he noticed the many levels of power in the airport that he recognized as the heroes waiting for him. Sighing in exasperation, he decided to get into his scale mail that didn't have any wings as he landed the plane as he placed his belongings in a magic portal. He knew that he could just as easily teleport to Yasaka's home, but he really needed to make sure that these heroes stopped coming after him. He had a job to get to in order to protect his new leader, as she was the only one who never thought bad of him, except for his timid nature that was beaten out of him by Thor. When a man noticed Izuku's timid nature towards women, he surrounded Izuku with the very endowed Valkyries, as they were told to charm him as much as possible, but not to the point of which he would take their virtues. Needless to say, it worked wonderfully to the point that he actually got along with all of the Valkyries, but the only one he got along the best with was Rossweiss, and Odin had made many jokes about them being together in his time training with them. Izuku got out of his plane as he saw helicopters with news agents inside, recording him entering the building of the airport as they reported the events. All around the world, everyone was watching as the heroes prepared for their strongest opponent yet. Even All Might was there, and he was shaking either with excitement or trepidation since he couldn't know how Izuku got his power. From the last time he heard from Izuku, his power of the Red Dragon of Domination was extremely powerful. Not only that, but it was because he was quirkless in the first place that he never even knows about the power within himself. As they saw a huge person enter the area, they found a draconic armor walking towards them as his aura was flowing around him like a second armor. Endeavor was the first to attack the armored being as he saw the Red Dragon as a villain from the beginning, since he stated that the armor had to be a transformative quirk. They had made especially sure that young Bakugo had not been aware of this raid on Red Dragon, since the boy was sure to mess things up even more if he was present. As Red Dragon shrugged off hell flames in a form of a ball, the armored being walked closer to the group as Eraserhead made his announcement. I can't turn off his quirk, so either it's a mutation or he has no quirk, Eraserhead said, as All Might moved closer to Izuku. Izuku lowered his head as soon as the hero who crushed his dreams stood in front of him with a sad smile on his face. What do you wish to do? All Might, Drake called out, as everyone heard the voice of the dragon. Are you willing to come in with us? I would rather not put civilians in danger with the area we are in, All Might said, staring at the emerald eyes that were being shown in the eye holes of the armor, seeing Izuku's very expressive eyes. We will not allow ourselves to be taken into the police. They will immediately place us in jail. I apologize, All Might. But in order to stop us from where we're going, you'd have to kill us, Drake said, as he challenged the hero to kill his host. How much more powerful did you get from your training? All Might asked, buying time for more heroes to come here? Or are you trying to get to know my host? Drake asked. I failed him as a hero back when he was attacked by a sludge villain, and I crushed his dreams of being a hero. And when he proved to me that he could be a hero without a quirk, he inspired me to act to save both his life and young Bakugo's life. Had he not been there, young Bakugo would have died, and it would have been my fault, All Might said. And just as Drake was about to talk, All Might continued speaking. But that doesn't excuse my actions for crushing his dreams. Now that you're back, Are you going back into vigilantism? All Might asked. Izuku seemed to think with his eyes, expressing that he was thinking about what All Might said. It wasn't a shock to the man that Izuku shook his head no. My host has decided to not pursue his dream of being a hero. He learned that the world doesn't like those of quirkless status, and he will just go to Kyoto's capital and continue his job there. Drake said, as All Might looked at them in confusion. What job? He asked, concerned. My host is the bodyguard of Lady Yasaka, the leader of the yokai faction. His job is to keep both her and her daughter safe, and with all you heroes here. Drake said, increasing the power of Izuku to the point that every single hero was on edge. You all are getting in our way. Drake called out, punching All Might in the face, sending the man flying into Endeavor. The battle is fierce as the heroes and hero students battle Red Dragon. Punches are flying, quirks are being used as fiercely as the punches and kicks. It was pandemonium on Earth, as Izuku dealt with the small fry heroes as they were defeated without much fanfare. His power was on the lower spectrum of Loki, the god of mischief, and he was going very easy on the heroes since their power only reached that of a high-class devil at full power. With Izuku treating this battle as if it was a warm-up for protecting Yasaka, the hero students had used their quirks in order to try and stop him when all the big-time heroes had failed. Once hitting a closer look at Izuku in his balance breaker form, they all noticed that he was just shorter than Kaminari, since he was around 5 feet 5 inches in height. Are we sure that he is a villain? A brown bob-cut hair girl asked, concerned. Izuku moved closer to them as he made his way to leave the airport when a boy with a bird head had used his quirk in order to push Izuku back. Dark Shadow, he called out, as it sent Izuku flying back into a beam in the wall. As cement had started to cover Izuku's body, everyone watched as Izuku merely shrugged off the 10-inch thick cement as he jumped down and knocked out the pro hero Cementos with a mere flick of his wrist. All of the heroes had been knocked out, with mere ease as Izuku stood in front of the hero students. That was when some of the girls moved closer to Izuku as he took a slow stance of preparing to fight, and the girls noticed his reluctance to fight. Why did you become a vigilante? A pink-haired girl called out. Why? Drake asked, as the pink-haired girl nodded her head. They all heard the steam coming from the mask as Izuku's face was revealed to them as they saw just how young he really was. From his face, he looked like he was younger than them, since all the baby fat made him look like he was in middle school. The reason I was a vigilante was to see how long the heroes would take to find and take me down. It was training for me, Izuku said as he released his armor. But why? You only wanted to help people, right? The brown-haired girl asked. Yes, I only wish to help people. That was my only wish in the world, and I was beaten down and burned because of it. My dreams were crushed and shattered on the day I was attacked by a sludge villain and saved Bakugo from the very same one. After that, have framed me as being a villain, causing me to leave the town of Mizudafu and be on the run, Izuku said as he walked past the hero students. That was when 2 girls attacked Izuku as he was walking, one with her earphone jacks as the other made a literal cannon and shot it at Izuku, who held his ears in pain since his ears were extra sensitive to sound. As the 2 girls continued their attacks on him, the rest of the girls and the hero students watched on in horror as Izuku started to growl like an animal and flew past them faster than any of them could see and knocked both of the girls out. As they turned around to see where he went, they found him holding their class president as well as her friend in his arms as he placed them gently on the ground in front of them. Don't follow me. I would rather not kill any of you and would rather see you all prosper as heroes and heroines. I will be rooting for you all when you graduate from your training, Izuku said as he walked away from the airport. If this is what the world has become for heroes, then I quit being a hero, a girl said as Izuku stopped and turned around. He saw that the brown-haired girl threw her helmet on the ground and walked up to him. You have a great future as a heroine who is a rescue hero. You don't have to throw it away for me and my words, Izuku said as the girl stood in front of him. Heroes have always been about fame and money, and I only wanted the money so that I could send it to my parents so they could live lavishly. I never wanted to become a hero, just help them with their job, the girl said as the other girls watched her in shock. What about your parents? Your friends? Izuku asked, as the girl looked back at them as she whispers to him. They seem to think that I am in love with Bakugo, and I am not in love with him. If they think that, then I am not going to be friends with them. The girl said, as Izuku stared at her for a moment. What's your name? He asked. Uraraka Ochako, and I was supposed to be the gravity heroine, Uravity, she said, as she shook his hand as he felt his gravity fade. Nodding his head, he started to walk on the air as she followed him as she tried to get him to get on the ground. The heroes around them had woke up at this point and heard Ochako say those things as they got visibly angered by her words. Most notably Endeavor, as he started to charge his fire to the maximum as he flared his power around him and formed a powerful beam of flames that he blasted to Izuku and Ochako. Sensing the danger the girl was in, Izuku formed his armor around her and himself, as his armor took the blast of flames, as Ochako very quickly became sweaty inside the armor. Turning around in his armor, he looked at Endeavor as he slowly moved closer to the man. For trying to attack my host, as well as a woman who is now classified as a civilian. You should be ashamed for nearly killing an innocent, Drake called out angrily. Endeavor then said the words that put him in his grave towards Izuku. She shouldn't have gotten in the way then. Before all hell broke loose, as the number 2 hero was killed on live television, as everyone watched, as Izuku flew towards the number 2 hero faster than he could see and impaled him with an expressionless face as he stared into the hero's face himself. As vital fluid flowed on his arm, Izuku pulled his arm out of the man's chest as his fluid flew out with the arm, and everyone watched in horror as Endeavor fell to the ground in both pain as well as vital fluid coming out of his mouth, chest, as well as nose. He took his last breath on the cement of the airport as everyone screamed in fear as Izuku flew off towards the Kyoto barrier. Never again will I make someone suffer, Izuku thought to himself as he flew in the distance, completely forgetting about Ochako hugging his chest inside his armor. Ochako and Izuku made their way through the alleyways of Kyoto as they arrived in the small city that was really popular. So, Midoriya-san, where are you leading me? Ochako asked Izuku as he continued to lead her through the area. I am making sure that you are brought to Lady Yasaka. If you wish to continue your training as a heroine who saves people, then you will need to learn Senjutsu, Tuki, as well as healing sage arts. But you will learn how to do that later, as that will require you to do something that will be definitely outside of your comfort zone, Izuku said, as they finally arrived at the mansion that housed Lady Yasaka and his loyal women. Walking towards the home of the Yukai leader, he and Ochako had made their way near the door when a little girl with fox ears had shown up with an angered look on her face. Who are you? And why have you come here? She called out angrily. Kuno-chan, it's me. Izuku Midoriya, Izuku said, as Kuno looked at him closely. As she recognized his freckles on his face, she teared up as she ran into his arms. I thought that you were dead, she cried out, as Izuku held her close to him. It's okay, Kuno-chan. I am here, and I will not leave you ever again, Izuku said, as he picked the girl up and headed inside the home. As he showed Ochako around the mansion, he soon found Lady Yasaka talking to Osami, Keitase, and Murayama as they were cooking dinner. I tried to tell them that you'd be sharing the chicken later, Murayama called out, pulling the pink-haired Keitase away while she tried to smack Osami from grabbing her chest. Are they always like this? Ochako asked, as Drake decided to speak for Izuku. They're always like this. It is like they want my host to do them senselessly. Drake grumbled as Ochako looked at the wrist weirdly. As soon as the word went through her mind, her face became completely red to the point that she started to float in the air. It wasn't until Yasaka noticed Izuku's energy signature that she told the others to stop what they were doing. Welcome home, Izuku-kun, Yasaka said, smiling. At the look, Izuku walked over to the woman as he hugged her close to his body. She hugged him close to her as well as he took in her scent because he was close to losing his mentality since leaving Asgard. Nice to see that he likes being in my rack so much. Yasaka sighed happily. Ochako, looking at the scene, looked at it with a longing look before shaking her head aghast at what she was thinking about. Sitting down at the table, Yasaka had brought Izuku to her lap as she used some magic to knock him out so that she could talk to their newcomer without angering Izuku too much. Can I ask why you followed him here? He doesn't normally take people from the outside and bring them here of all places. Yasaka asked seriously. He kind of defeated every single hero in the area of the airport in Kyoto. And he kind of told me that being a hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. And I was shown why. Ochako said, as she looked away. Are you still wishing to become a hero? Osami asked, curiously. Yes, I want to make sure that my parents can live lavish lives. We've always been poor, and I don't want them to focus on me all the time. So I tried to become a hero to make sure that they couldn't rely on their job of construction. But now that I see the world in his view, Ochako said, looking at a sleeping Izuku, everyone noticed the look in her eyes. Don't tell me he got you wrapped around his fingers as well. Murayama groaned. What do you mean? Ochako asked incredulously. He saves you once, and then later on he makes you become his woman by just his words alone. His charisma is filled out as he can make anyone believe him with just his honest words alone. Keites said, huffing in anger. What do you mean by that? Ochako asked. What the girls are talking about is that Izuku's experiences in his life had a somewhat jaded outlook on heroes to the point that he doesn't wish to become one anymore. Yasaka said, as Ochako looked on in horror. Who destroyed his wish to become a hero? Ochako asked, concerned. It was a mix of society, as well as his peers before he became the Red Dragon Emperor. Osami said, sadly. What is a Red Dragon Emperor? Ochako asked, as everyone in the room went over the time before everything happened in the world, the time before quirks. And that is where we come in. He beat us in our fighting styles and somehow managed to get us to teach him how to wield a blade. Honestly, it was surprising that he was a complete cinnamon roll when we actually got to know him. Murayama said, as Keites nodded her head. Huh, that is what my class refers to me as. Ochako said, mumbling that exact wording. Oh God, not another one. Osami called out, as Ochako went out of her small mumbling. What are you talking about, another one? She called out. The night continued on as Ochako laughed with the new family she had made, and she never really noticed that Yasaka had called her men to make sure that Ochako's parents were given a lot of money to keep them living on. The next morning, Izuku showed Ochako how to unlock her hidden key within her body. Surprisingly, it was easy for her since most of it was collected in her arms and legs. As he showed her how to activate it at will, he trained her over the next few hours in order to make sure that she knew how to use it properly, as well as make sure in the area. Izuku's breathing was becoming heavily apparent as he was panting more than usual. Midoriya, what is wrong? You normally aren't this worn out when fighting the heroes. Ochako asked, as they were taking a break. F it. I need to leave for about a few days. I can't be around you during that time frame, Izuku said, as he spit out some spit filled with an aroma of arousal. Walking away with a slight limp in his left leg, Izuku disappeared into the bamboo forest without Ochako knowing where he was going. Walking back inside the mansion, she finds herself face to chest with Lady Yasaka as she was making her rounds of the mansion. Oh, Uraraka-san, how are you doing right now? She asked kindly. I'm fine, just worried about Midoriya-san, Ochako said, looking outside. Was there something wrong with him? She asked. He was heavily panting, oddly worn out during training. Not to mention he would make subtle looks at my chest and rear from time to time. But it never really bothered me in the slightest now that I think about it, Ochako said, as she heard Yasaka chuckling. You should have told me sooner. He is going through his mating season once again. I'm surprised he didn't mate with another human earlier this year when he was going through his vigilante streak. Yasaka mentioned as Ochako looked at her with an unknowing look. What do you mean mating season? She asked, bewildered. Well, whenever a dragon reaches the early spring or late winter, he gets into deep ruts where he wants to do it with anything that moves. Surprisingly, he gets oddly territorial around women who are close to him during that time, Yasaka said, remembering a time when Izuku growled at any man who looked at her with lust. How bad was it this time if he was cursing under his breath? Ochako asked worriedly. He was cursing under his breath? She asked confused. Yes, he said F it, and it wasn't really a curse, but he said it while stuttering. It was like he was really holding something back. She said, as Yasaka looked at her in horror. Well, it was nice knowing you, little one. Yasaka said, laughing a little. Why are you laughing? Ochako asked, concerned. When he is cursing around a girl who is near him during his rut, he will get oddly possessive. Not only that, but he will be seeing you tonight without any knowledge of it later on. Yasaka said as she walked away. How do I prevent him from doing anything to me? Ochako called out. You don't. You just take 5 pills in order to make sure you don't get preg, Yasaka said, walking around a corner. Ochako looked at the pills in her hands that were definitely not in her hands earlier in their conversation and resolved to take them before evening. Unknown to both parties, a certain black-haired girl was watching their conversation from afar. She had black cat ears, as well as 2 black tails, as she never noticed the glowing green eyes far behind her as they made their way to her location. As she heard a twig snap behind her, she was met with the naked form of someone who had green draconic wings as he placed his hand over her mouth, as she was dragged into a hole in the ground with the only thing being heard from her was her screams of both pain as well as pleasure coming from the hole for the evening. So, this was the end of part 3 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.